What if the person you loved most had been keeping a secret from day one? What if every smile, every gesture, every word you thought meant something real was part of a plan meticulously documented in a hidden diary? Prince Harry thought he knew Meghan Markle, the woman he had married with his whole heart, the woman he had left royal life for, the woman he had trusted with everything. But he was about to discover a truth so shocking that it would not only shatter their marriage, it would send ripples through the entire royal family and captivate the world. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It began, as many royal scandals do, in silence. In the quiet corners of Montecito, in the sprawling estate that promised privacy, a diary lay hidden, a diary that contained confessions, strategies, and revelations about Meghan Markle and her mother, Doria Ragland. It wasn't just a personal journal. It was a blueprint, a roadmap that showed, in black and white, that Meghan had married for fame, for wealth, and, astonishingly, with plans to eventually step away from the royal family from the very start. Imagine the moment Harry opened it. Imagine the disbelief, the pounding of his heart, the feeling that every choice he had made was suddenly part of someone else's script. He had believed he was part of a love story, a partnership, a family. Instead, he realized he had been reading someone else's carefully constructed plan. And in that instant, everything changed. This story isn't just about a marriage ending. It's about ambition, deception, and strategy. It's about the collision between public image and private truth. For decades, the world has watched the royal family with fascination, seeing only what the media or official statements allowed. But behind closed doors, things are rarely simple. And when a diary surfaces, especially one belonging to a public figure whose every move is scrutinized, the consequences are explosive. From the outside, Meghan's life seemed enviable. She had it all: fame, glamour, influence. She walked red carpets, charmed audiences, and became a global figure almost overnight. Her marriage to Prince Harry only amplified her profile, turning her into one of the most photographed, most talked about people in the world. But what if all of this wasn't about love? What if her ambitions were not secret but meticulously documented, planned, and executed? What if every step she took, every smile for the cameras, was part of a larger design to gain freedom, wealth, and control? Harry's world had always been one of protocol, expectation, and intense scrutiny. Every action, every word, every public appearance carried weight. And yet, nothing in his training, nothing in his understanding of loyalty could have prepared him for the shock of discovering a secret diary that detailed intentions that went far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The diary wasn't just a record of thoughts or feelings. It was a calculated playbook. It documented a plan to manipulate, to charm, and ultimately to exit the royal family under circumstances that would maximize public sympathy and personal gain. Harry, who had believed in love as an anchor, suddenly felt adrift in a sea of deceit. Each page he turned revealed another layer: plans to relocate, strategies for public messaging, even instructions on how to navigate legal and financial maneuvers post-marriage. And what made it even more devastating was the involvement of her mother, Doria Ragland. According to the diary, this was not just a personal endeavor. It was a collaborative effort. Doria, it seemed, had guided Meghan from the very beginning, ensuring that each step would align with long-term ambitions. Harry wasn't just discovering secrets from his spouse. He was confronting a network of intentions that had been quietly influencing his life and decisions. The emotional toll was immediate. Imagine loving someone with every fiber of your being, thinking that trust and transparency are the foundation of your relationship, only to realize that you have been a character in someone else's story. The betrayal cuts deeper when it's not just emotional but strategic, when it affects not only your personal life but also your family, your reputation, and your sense of reality. Harry was forced to confront not just the end of a marriage, but the exposure of an elaborate personal strategy that had played out in secret for years. But what makes this story even more compelling is not just the betrayal itself, it's the timing and context. By the time Harry discovered the diary, their lives had become inseparable from public narrative. They were global icons, media sensations, and role models in the eyes of millions. every move they made was documented, analyzed, and broadcast worldwide. A secret like this was not just personal, it was explosive, capable of igniting media frenzy and altering public perception forever. Imagine, for a moment, the tension of those early days after the discovery. Harry, a man known for composure under pressure, found himself questioning every memory, every conversation, every shared moment. What was genuine? What had been staged? How deep did the plan go? And what would this mean not just for him, but for his children, his family, and the institution he had once vowed to serve? This story also raises questions that go beyond royal intrigue. It challenges our understanding of love, ambition, and the power of secrecy. How do you navigate a relationship when you realize that transparency, the very essence of trust, has been absent? How do you reconcile personal feelings with public responsibilities? And perhaps most provocatively, how does one move forward when the person you trusted most has not only hidden intentions, but has carefully documented them in a way that ensures you cannot escape their consequences? From a storytelling perspective, this is the kind of revelation that captivates audiences. It combines emotional stakes with strategic intrigue. It juxtaposes the fairy tale image the world has of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle with a hidden narrative that is both shocking and deeply human. The contrast between public persona and private reality creates suspense, tension, and emotional resonance. But the diary is only the beginning. While it revealed motives, plans, and ambitions, it also set the stage for a series of confrontations, negotiations, and emotional reckonings that would leave Harry questioning not just his marriage, but the very nature of trust and partnership. Every revelation demanded a response, every entry a reckoning. And in the world of royalty, where appearances are everything and privacy is scarce, these personal discoveries carry consequences far beyond the domestic sphere. The stakes were clear: a marriage on the rocks, a family watching closely, and a world waiting for answers. Harry had to decide how to confront these revelations, how to protect himself and his children, and how to navigate the fallout in a way that preserved dignity while acknowledging the betrayal. Meanwhile, the diary continued to offer new insights with every page: financial ambitions, social strategies, planned relocations, and even potential media leaks. It wasn't just a diary. It was a roadmap to control the narrative, designed to maximize advantage for Meghan and her mother. And here's the most shocking part. Some entries suggested that Meghan had contemplated leaving the royal family long before the wedding. The plans weren't spur-of-the-moment decisions made after fame and wealth were achieved. They were documented, deliberate, and precise. Harry's heart sank with each revelation, knowing that what he had thought was a shared journey of love was in many ways a calculated series of maneuvers he had only just uncovered. For the audience, the question becomes irresistible. How does one confront a partner who has meticulously documented intentions that contradict everything you believed? How does a marriage survive when the foundation of trust has been systematically dismantled? And perhaps most importantly, how does a prince, raised in a world of rules, expectation, and public service, respond to a betrayal that is as strategic as it is personal? As Harry grappled with these revelations, the next steps would prove even more dramatic. The confrontation with Meghan, the conversations with family, the public perception. Each element would add layers to a narrative that was already more complicated than anyone could have imagined. And while the diary offered clarity about intentions, it also introduced new questions. What else had been hidden? Were there allies involved? What were the consequences for their children, their family, and the institution itself? And just when Harry thought he had processed the immediate shock, the diary hinted at even deeper secrets. Secrets that threatened to reshape not only their personal lives, but the entire narrative that the public had come to believe. One entry in particular suggested that Meghan's ambitions extended far beyond what anyone could have predicted. It was a statement that would force Harry to reevaluate everything he had believed about their relationship, and it set the stage for a series of decisions that would culminate in a divorce that the world would never forget. By the time he closed the diary, Harry understood one fundamental truth. The marriage he had entered with hope, love, and commitment was built on a foundation that had been carefully constructed by someone else. And as he looked toward the future, he realized that there was no turning back. The revelations were too significant, the trust too broken. and the stakes too high. What does a perfect marriage look like from the outside? For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, it looked like a storybook come to life. Red carpet smiles, magazine covers, glamorous events. Everything was polished, curated, and seemingly flawless. To the world, they were the couple who had broken tradition, defied expectations, and rewritten royal history. But beneath the surface, the illusion was cracking, and Harry would soon realize that appearances had masked a complex web of hidden motives, careful manipulations, and a partnership that wasn't quite what it seemed. From the very beginning, Harry had been captivated by Meghan's charm, her confidence, and the way she seemed to understand his world without needing explanations. There was chemistry, undeniable and magnetic, and the world fell in love with their story. But love, Harry was about to learn, can be deceiving. Charm can be a mask, and a carefully constructed public persona can hide intentions that are far more calculated than anyone imagines. In the first months of their relationship, everything seemed effortless. There were photos of laughter in the streets of Toronto, shared coffee dates, and late-night conversations captured in candid snaps that flooded the tabloids. But even in those early days, subtle signs were there, small inconsistencies, brief moments where Meghan's focus seemed to drift to something beyond the moment, hints that there might be more going on than Harry realized. It's easy to romanticize these early days when seen from the outside, but Harry had a front-row seat to a different reality. He experienced moments that didn't make the headlines, whispered phone calls that ended abruptly, schedules that seemed orchestrated with precision, and a constant awareness that every interaction might be performing for an audience beyond just him. Was this behavior typical for someone in the public eye? Possibly. But as he would later discover, some of it was part of a much larger plan. Even friends noticed the difference. Advisors, confidants, and close family members reported a tension that wasn't visible to the world, but was palpable behind closed doors. Meghan was ambitious, yes, but ambitious in ways that Harry hadn't expected. She navigated social circles with an acute awareness of public perception, often steering conversations, appearances, and even charitable involvement toward outcomes that benefited her profile. At first, Harry admired this. It was impressive. But admiration turned to suspicion when patterns became clear. Patterns that would eventually be confirmed by the diary that would change everything. The public narrative painted a story of love conquering all. It was compelling, irresistible, and ideal for the media. Harry was depicted as the devoted prince, willing to step away from royal life to protect his marriage. Meghan was the modern, independent woman, a star in her own right, walking confidently alongside him. Together, they embodied a story that journalists, fans, and casual observers couldn't resist sharing. But beneath that glamour, a more complicated reality was unfolding. A reality that involved hidden plans, calculated moves, and ambitions that had nothing to do with love. Even within royal circles, whispers began to circulate. Close advisors noticed the way Meghan approached decisions, often consulting her mother or allies outside traditional channels. She wasn't just making personal choices, she was strategically plotting steps that would affect both her future and Harry's. And while Harry initially interpreted this as savvy and determined behavior, he would later recognize it as the early stages of a meticulously planned exit from the very institution he had been born into. The contrast between public image and private reality became increasingly stark. Social media highlighted every smile, every affectionate gesture, every glamorous moment. But in private, Harry began to notice inconsistencies, moments of silence that seemed loaded, conversations that hinted at agendas beyond their immediate relationship, and subtle manipulations that left him questioning intentions. It was the kind of subtlety that only becomes apparent when you are deeply invested, emotionally and personally. Friends and family tried to warn him, gently suggesting that not everything was as it seemed. But love has a way of clouding judgment. Harry wanted to believe in the romance, in the vision of a life together unburdened by the rigid traditions that had defined his past. He wanted to see the best, to trust, to hope that the person he had chosen to marry shared the same values and intentions. And yet, the seeds of doubt had been planted. Seeds that would grow into undeniable truths once the diary entered the picture. In hindsight, certain moments take on a new meaning. The delayed responses to important family matters, the subtle insistence on controlling media narratives, and the focus on personal branding were all part of a larger pattern. At the time, Harry saw them as quirks or personality traits. Only later, in the wake of the diary's revelations, did these behaviors reveal their true significance. What had seemed innocuous was actually deliberate, calculated, and aligned with long-term ambitions that Harry had been unaware of. And then there were the moments that seemed almost theatrical, events that, on the surface, appeared spontaneous but were, in fact, carefully orchestrated. Charity engagements, interviews, and photo ops weren't just public appearances. They were calculated to maximize attention, sympathy, and influence. It wasn't just about presenting a happy couple to the world. It was about controlling narratives, shaping perceptions, and securing a foundation for future plans. Harry began to feel the weight of these inconsistencies. The man who had grown up understanding protocol, trust, and honor found himself questioning everything. Was Meghan's affection real? Did she truly care for him? Or was he a means to an end? Every smile, every gesture, every declaration of love was suddenly examined under a new light as he began to connect dots that he had previously ignored or rationalized away. And yet, despite the growing unease, Harry's hope and optimism kept him invested. He wanted to believe in the love story, to see it through, to give it every chance to succeed. It's a dilemma familiar to anyone who has loved deeply. The desire to trust, the hope that intentions are genuine, even when subtle warning signs suggest otherwise. But love alone cannot sustain a relationship built on secrecy and calculated ambition. As months passed, the tension between appearance and reality became harder to ignore. The public saw the fairy tale. Harry saw the careful choreography behind it. Private moments of intimacy were juxtaposed against strategic planning for media appearances. Conversations about family and future were shadowed by discussions that seemed to serve an agenda beyond the immediate relationship. And through it all, Harry remained unaware of the most damning evidence yet, the diary that documented intentions far more calculated than he could have imagined. The glittering illusion of their marriage, the fairy tale narrative presented to the world, was fragile. Harry began to sense that what he had believed to be a partnership of love was in fact a carefully constructed facade. And the realization of this illusion set the stage for one of the most shocking discoveries of his life. The hidden diary, the confessions of ambition, and the blueprint that had been quietly guiding Meghan and her mother from the very beginning. But as the first page of the diary came into view, Harry would learn that the illusion was only the beginning. The pages revealed not just hidden intentions, but a level of planning that suggested the marriage itself had been a calculated move, orchestrated with precision and foresight. What he read would challenge every assumption, every memory, and every belief he had about love, trust, and the person he had chosen to marry. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What would you do if the person you trusted most had a secret journal, a diary that revealed ambitions, plans, and intentions you never suspected? For Prince Harry, the discovery of Meghan Markle's secret diary was the kind of revelation that no training, no protocol, and no life experience could have prepared him for. It wasn't hidden in plain sight. It wasn't casually left on a coffee table. It was tucked away carefully, almost ceremoniously, as if the very act of finding it was meant to reveal a truth at the exact right moment. The diary wasn't just a personal reflection. From the moment Harry turned its first page, he realized he was reading a roadmap that had quietly guided Meghan and, indirectly, her mother Doria, through every major step of their relationship. It contained details that were both intimate and strategic, blending personal confessions with calculated plans. The pages chronicled not just feelings, but carefully considered moves, timing, public perception, media engagement, and, astonishingly, exit strategies from the royal family itself. Harry remembers the moment vividly. Sitting in the quiet of Montecito, the California sun filtering through the large bay windows, he held the leather-bound journal in his hands. There was a weight to it, not just physical, but emotional. The anticipation, the unknown, the mix of hope and fear. It all made him pause. Could it really be as he feared? Was this just a diary of dreams and musings, or something much more calculated? As he began to read, disbelief quickly gave way to shock. Early entries were innocuous enough: reflections on family, thoughts about career aspirations, and musings about life outside the spotlight. But as the pages progressed, the tone shifted. There were notes about fame, strategy, and influence, often intertwined with subtle references to Harry himself. It became clear that Meghan had thought through every major milestone, not only in her career but in their relationship, with meticulous attention to detail. What struck Harry most was the calculated nature of the diary. Some entries read like a blueprint for personal advancement, charting out steps to establish a public profile, control media narratives, and manage public perception. Other entries revealed private ambitions, a desire for independence, financial security, and most shockingly, a plan to leave the royal family under circumstances that would ensure sympathy and support from the public. Every detail, every note, every reference hinted at a strategy far beyond what Harry had imagined in a spouse. And it wasn't just Meghan's ambitions. Some entries suggested collaboration with her mother. Doria Ragland appeared in the diary not as a passive figure, but as an active participant in shaping Meghan's path. Advice, strategic suggestions, and tactical insights were documented, demonstrating a level of coordination that made Harry realize this was more than personal reflection. It was a coordinated plan. The diary painted a picture of a marriage that was part partnership, part negotiation, and part performance. There were entries detailing conversations, carefully staged public appearances, and even subtle manipulations intended to shape Harry's behavior in ways that supported Meghan's broader objectives. Each page was a mix of personal sentiment and professional strategy, a combination that made it almost impossible to separate genuine emotion from calculated action. Harry felt a range of emotions. Anger, disbelief, and betrayal surged alongside sorrow and confusion. He questioned his own judgment. Had he been blind, naive, or had the diary revealed truths that were impossible to see until this exact moment? The emotional complexity was overwhelming. The very woman he had loved, shared dreams with, and trusted implicitly had documented intentions that undermined everything he believed about their relationship. It was at this point that the diary revealed the most disturbing entries. References to long-term plans that involved stepping away from royal duties, relocating to maximize privacy, and creating a narrative that would protect Meghan while potentially leaving Harry in a vulnerable position. These weren't spontaneous thoughts or fleeting ideas. They were considered strategies, written in clear, methodical prose that suggested foresight, intent, and careful calculation. Harry's mind raced. How could someone document ambitions that directly impacted their spouse without discussion? How could love coexist with such meticulous planning, particularly when those plans involved significant life-altering decisions? And perhaps most pressing, had he unknowingly been manipulated from the very beginning? The diary also contained references to media and public perception. Meghan appeared to have anticipated every question, every interview, and every scandal. Strategies for dealing with the press, managing social media narratives, and maintaining a public image were meticulously outlined. Harry began to understand that what had seemed like confidence and initiative was actually a part of a larger design, intended to ensure control over the story as it unfolded publicly. As the pages turned, Harry's disbelief evolved into clarity. This was not a diary of casual thoughts. It was a strategy guide for life, carefully blending personal ambition with relational influence. And the revelation was painful, because it forced him to confront the fact that the relationship he believed in had been shaped by plans he had no knowledge of. Every smile, every word of affection, every gesture he had trusted now carried a shadow of doubt. The diary also exposed subtle manipulations, encouragements to steer decisions, suggestions for public appearances that would frame Harry in a supportive but secondary role, and even calculated praise designed to reinforce specific behaviors. It was a masterclass in influence, and Harry was suddenly aware that he had been, unknowingly, playing a role within a script he had not written. What made the diary even more alarming was the evidence of long-term foresight. Entries dated back to the earliest days of the relationship, detailing expectations, goals, and steps to achieve them. The extent of planning suggested that the idea of leaving the royal family wasn't spontaneous or reactive. It had been envisioned from the outset, a strategy that included Harry as a key participant without his knowledge. The emotional impact of these revelations cannot be overstated. Harry experienced a mix of heartbreak, anger, and disbelief. Trust, once implicit, had been undermined by careful planning and hidden intentions. Love, once assumed to be mutual and spontaneous, now seemed intertwined with strategy, manipulation, and ambition. And the betrayal was compounded by the knowledge that this plan had involved not just Meghan, but her mother, creating a network of influence that had subtly shaped the relationship from the beginning. And yet, amid the shock and betrayal, Harry felt a need to understand. He read further, looking for context, for nuance, for anything that could reconcile the affection he had felt with the strategy that now seemed so clear. There were passages that expressed genuine emotion, reflections on family, and moments of vulnerability. But these entries existed alongside plans, strategies, and intentions that could not be ignored. The mixture of honesty and calculation created a tension that was almost unbearable. By the time he finished the first few sections of the diary, Harry was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. He had not simply been deceived, he had been unknowingly incorporated into a plan that was written long before he even realized it existed. The relationship, as he had experienced it, had been influenced by a series of deliberate actions designed to ensure outcomes that favored Meghan's ambitions and independence. What made the discovery even more shocking was the realization that this diary wasn't just a private reflection. It had been a roadmap for public perception as well. Media strategies, social appearances, and even statements made to friends were part of a narrative designed to reinforce control over both private and public outcomes. Harry realized that he had been navigating not only a marriage, but a performance, carefully orchestrated to achieve objectives he had not been privy to. And yet, amidst the emotional chaos, Harry recognized the diary's importance. It was the key to understanding the relationship, the intentions, and the planning that had gone on behind closed doors. It offered clarity even as it introduced new questions. What else had been documented? Were there other secrets yet undiscovered? How would these revelations shape his decisions, his public image, and the future of his family? The diary had changed everything. It exposed ambitions, intentions, and calculations that redefined the marriage. It forced Harry to reassess every interaction, every conversation, and every memory. It wasn't simply a personal betrayal. It was a strategic one, intertwined with ambition, influence, and foresight. And it left him facing a choice that would alter the course of his life forever. But what came next would escalate the shock even further, and no one saw it coming. What would you do if the person you trusted most not only had hidden ambitions, but documented them in explicit detail? For Prince Harry, the diary revealed that Meghan Markle's intentions went far beyond personal dreams or career aspirations. Each page he turned exposed a level of strategic planning that blurred the line between personal confession and calculated manipulation. It was as if someone had handed him a blueprint of betrayal, designed to challenge his understanding of trust, love, and loyalty. The entries in the diary were unnerving because they weren't vague musings. They weren't casual notes about feelings or fleeting ambitions. They were deliberate, carefully articulated plans. Some pages contained reflections on media perception, timing, and social influence. Others detailed objectives that directly intersected with Harry's life: how to maintain public sympathy, how to maximize independence while minimizing scrutiny, and how to manage relationships with the royal family for ultimate control. One particularly chilling section outlined a timeline of anticipated events. Early entries suggested that Meghan had considered the long-term implications of every major milestone in their relationship, from engagements and public appearances to interviews and charitable initiatives. Harry realized that what he had thought were spontaneous choices were often carefully plotted steps, designed to achieve goals that he had no knowledge of. The diary also revealed that from the very beginning, there had been an intent to gain freedom from royal constraints. Meghan's entries described scenarios where she would gradually distance herself from official duties, citing personal or family reasons, while simultaneously cultivating public support and sympathy. It wasn't just a plan for autonomy. It was a blueprint for controlling narrative, public opinion, and even Harry's reactions. Even more disturbing were the entries involving her mother. Doria Ragland appeared not as a passive observer, but as an active strategist. Some passages indicated coaching, advice on timing, and input on how to navigate the press, royal protocols, and Harry himself. It became increasingly clear that the marriage had been influenced by a network of intentions that Harry had been unaware of. A collaboration designed to advance goals that weren't entirely aligned with his own. Reading these passages, Harry felt a mixture of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak. Every memory, every moment of intimacy, every declaration of love was suddenly scrutinized under a new lens. He questioned whether affection had ever been genuine, or whether it had been intertwined with performance, strategy, and deliberate manipulation. And yet, amid the shock, he noticed entries that conveyed genuine sentiment, which only intensified the emotional complexity. It was the tension between apparent affection and calculated planning that made the betrayal feel even deeper. Some diary entries detailed subtle manipulations intended to shape Harry's behavior: encouragement to follow certain routines, praise for actions that aligned with her goals, and gentle nudges to reinforce compliance were interwoven with personal reflections. Harry began to see patterns he had previously overlooked, moments where he had believed in spontaneity, only to discover there had been orchestration behind them. The diary contained reflections on wealth, financial independence, and the strategic use of public platforms to ensure security. Harry realized that many of the decisions he had attributed to chance or circumstance were, in fact, deliberate steps designed to establish leverage and protect interests. The interplay between personal relationships and strategic planning was both fascinating and devastating. The emotional impact of these confessions cannot be overstated. Harry experienced a profound sense of betrayal, one compounded by admiration for the intelligence and foresight evident in the diary. He understood that he was facing someone who was not only capable of genuine affection, but also remarkable strategic thinking. It was a duality that left him torn. Respect for ingenuity mingled with sorrow and disbelief over deception. In addition to personal insights, the diary offered a window into Meghan's public strategies. Entries discussed how to handle media inquiries, frame interviews, and present an image that would maximize support while minimizing scrutiny. Harry began to recognize that the public perception he had trusted was in many ways orchestrated. The persona the world adored was carefully curated, blending charm with calculated messaging. The diary also hinted at potential long-term consequences for Harry. Some passages suggested ways to influence his decisions, guide his public behavior, and even affect his interactions with family members. It was subtle but deliberate guidance that, if followed unknowingly, would reinforce the very objectives outlined in the diary. Harry understood that the stakes were higher than personal betrayal. There was a public and relational dimension to the revelations, one that affected not just him but his family, his children, and the institution itself. As he continued reading, Harry came across reflections on public sympathy and narrative control. Meghan had documented how specific interviews, appearances, and charitable actions could be timed to maximize empathy and minimize criticism. It was a masterclass in influence, and Harry realized that he had been unwittingly participating in a performance that aligned with objectives he had no knowledge of. The diary also exposed the meticulous nature of her exit plan from the royal family. Every potential obstacle had been anticipated: media reactions, family responses, and public opinion. The entries demonstrated foresight that went beyond personal ambition, extending into strategy, public relations, and careful messaging. Harry recognized that what had seemed like spontaneous decisions were, in fact, part of a carefully constructed plan. And yet, amid the revelations, there were moments of vulnerability. Meghan's writing occasionally reflected doubt, fear, and personal uncertainty. She documented the challenges of public life, the pressure of constant scrutiny, and the emotional toll of maintaining appearances. These passages humanized her, complicating the narrative and creating an emotional tension that Harry found difficult to navigate. He was confronted not only with ambition and manipulation, but also with genuine human emotion intertwined with strategy. By the time he finished reading, Harry was forced to confront a reality that was both painful and undeniable. The diary revealed intentions, ambitions, and plans that had been carefully documented long before he realized their significance. It wasn't just personal betrayal, it was strategic, deliberate, and executed with foresight, and it left him facing difficult questions. How should he respond? Could the marriage survive revelations of such magnitude? And what would this mean for his future, both privately and publicly? The confessions in the diary were clear. This marriage had always been intertwined with ambition, and while love had existed in some form, it had been accompanied by a strategic blueprint that guided decisions, interactions, and even public appearances. Harry realized that he was not merely a participant in a relationship, but a key element in a carefully orchestrated plan designed to advance ambitions that he had only just begun to comprehend. But what came next would push Harry to a breaking point, and no one outside those walls could have anticipated. What do you do when a betrayal isn't just personal, but extends into the family and the institution you've spent your life serving? For Prince Harry, discovering Meghan's diary was only the beginning. The next revelation came when he realized that this was not a secret he could handle alone. His family, the royal family, would inevitably be affected. And in that world, where protocol and appearances matter as much as truth, the tension that erupted was immediate, palpable, and dangerous. The first call Harry made after reading the diary was to a trusted family member. His voice was tight, controlled, but laced with emotion. He tried to convey what he had learned, to explain the depth of the strategic planning detailed in Meghan's writings. But as he spoke, he felt the weight of disbelief on both ends. Could it be true? Could someone really orchestrate a marriage so carefully, involving not just themselves but family influence, and keep it hidden for so long? The family's initial reaction was a mixture of shock, concern, and protective instinct. Royal advisors and family members quickly recognized the potential fallout, not just emotionally for Harry, but publicly for the monarchy itself. Every revelation in the diary had consequences beyond Harry and Meghan. It touched on media perception, public sympathy, and even trust in the institution of royalty. A personal betrayal had escalated into a constitutional and public relations crisis. Tensions escalated rapidly during private meetings. Conversations that should have been about personal support became negotiations of strategy. Harry's siblings, close cousins, and advisors weighed in, offering advice, questioning intentions, and debating the best course of action. Every sentence carried subtext, every reaction was analyzed, and every word had the potential to influence both private dynamics and public perception. The emotional strain on Harry was enormous. He had trusted Meghan, loved her, and believed in the partnership they shared. Now, he was forced to reconcile those feelings with the revelations in the diary and the family's urgent counsel. The realization that this was not just about personal betrayal, but a carefully calculated plan involving public manipulation left him questioning every decision he had made. Meanwhile, Meghan's reaction added another layer of tension. When confronted about the diary and its contents, she appeared composed, measured, and unflappable. Her calmness, however, did little to assuage Harry's fears. If the diary was intended to shape outcomes, then her composure was part of the design. The sense of being subtly manipulated, even in confrontation, created a psychological tension that Harry could not ignore. Family dynamics, already complicated by years of public scrutiny and media pressure, became further strained. Discussions about loyalty, responsibility, and personal boundaries intermingled with debates over how to handle the information publicly. Advisors warned of leaks, strategists suggested controlled messaging, and Harry found himself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting advice, emotional turmoil, and strategic necessity. The tension was compounded by the presence of Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland. Known for her calm demeanor, Doria had always maintained a certain influence over Meghan. Now, in the wake of the diary's revelations, her role became increasingly scrutinized. Family members questioned whether Doria had intentionally guided Meghan's actions, and if so, how much of Harry's life had been subtly directed by an outside influence. The realization that betrayal might extend beyond the immediate relationship intensified Harry's sense of isolation. This was not just a marriage under strain, it was a microcosm of strategic chess. Every conversation, every action, and every reaction had potential consequences. Harry was navigating an intricate web of loyalty, ambition, and trust, where missteps could affect not only his marriage, but the perception of the monarchy, the well-being of his children, and his own reputation. Publicly, the world still saw the fairy tale. Every headline, every photograph, every social media post projected happiness and unity. But behind the palace walls, tension simmered. Harry's family, though supportive, was now entangled in decisions that had far-reaching implications. Conversations that might have been simple or private now carried weight, as the potential for leaks and public scrutiny loomed over every word. Harry began to notice patterns in Meghan's interactions with the family that previously seemed innocuous. Subtle comments, strategic flattery, and careful timing of disclosures suggested that she was aware of the family's influence and was navigating it to her advantage. The diary had revealed her internal plan, but these real-time interactions confirmed its execution. The combination of documented intentions and observed behavior created a chilling clarity. Harry had been navigating a relationship designed with precision, one that involved both emotional manipulation and calculated influence. As days passed, the strain on Harry became visible. Late-night calls, hurried meetings, and whispered conversations underscored the pressure he was under. Advisors stressed caution, family members pressed for clarity, and Harry struggled to reconcile loyalty, love, and self-preservation. Every decision felt momentous, every conversation potentially decisive. The confrontation between Harry and Meghan escalated into a series of discussions that were intense, emotionally charged, and revealing. What started as questions about intentions quickly evolved into debates about values, trust, and ambition. The diary, once hidden, now shaped every interaction, influencing tone, content, and strategy. Harry began to understand that the betrayal was not merely emotional, it was systemic, involving careful planning, familial influence, and media considerations. The diary also hinted at future moves, suggesting scenarios in which Harry's responses could be anticipated and leveraged. This added a psychological layer to the tension. Not only had betrayal occurred, but it had been designed in a way that expected certain reactions, shaping outcomes in Meghan's favor. Harry's awareness of this manipulation deepened the emotional strain and complicated his ability to respond authentically. Family members began to weigh in more directly, offering advice, guidance, and, in some cases, ultimatums. The discussions were fraught with emotion, strategy, and concern. Every suggestion carried implications for public perception and personal consequence. Harry, already emotionally overwhelmed, had to balance personal feelings with strategic necessity, a challenge that intensified the stakes and heightened the sense of urgency. Amidst the tension, Harry struggled to maintain composure publicly. The couple's appearances, interviews, and social engagements became exercises in restraint, as the public remained blissfully unaware of the turbulence beneath the surface. Every smile, every gesture, every photograph now carried a weight that no one outside their inner circle could perceive. The illusion of harmony was maintained, but the reality was one of profound stress, negotiation, and strategic consideration. The culmination of these tensions set the stage for decisions that would alter the trajectory of Harry's personal life and public role. Confronted with betrayal, influence, and the psychological weight of manipulation, he had to consider divorce, not just as a personal solution, but as a strategic one. Every element of the family dynamic, every insight from the diary, and every observed interaction contributed to a growing understanding. The marriage could not survive under these conditions. And as discussions intensified, Harry realized that the family tension was not just about personal betrayal. It was about survival, perception, and control. Every decision, every confrontation, and every negotiation carried stakes that extended far beyond the private sphere. The realization was both daunting and clarifying. The illusion of love had fractured, and the consequences would reverberate for years to come. But what came next would escalate the crisis even further, and the world would soon see the consequences of these hidden agendas play out in ways no one expected. When betrayal comes from someone you love, it cuts deep. But what happens when that betrayal extends beyond the person you trusted into the influence of a parent, a confidant, a guiding hand you never anticipated? For Prince Harry, discovering the depth of Meghan Markle's ambitions was shocking enough. But learning that her mother, Doria Ragland, had been quietly shaping, guiding, and influencing those ambitions brought the revelations to an entirely new level. From the diary, Harry began to see patterns that had previously escaped his attention. Doria was not simply a supportive mother offering advice when asked. She was a strategist, a partner in planning, and a subtle orchestrator of decisions that affected both Meghan's trajectory and, by extension, Harry's life. Some entries directly referenced conversations with Doria, detailing suggestions, guidance, and instructions meant to navigate both the personal and public dimensions of the relationship. The nature of this influence was precise. Meghan's diary outlined moments where Doria's counsel had directed choices about media engagement, social appearances, and even the handling of family dynamics. What might have appeared as natural decision-making was, in fact, informed by advice calculated to maximize influence, control perception, and protect Meghan's long-term ambitions. Harry realized that he had been navigating not only a relationship, but also a subtle network of guidance and direction that had been in place long before he suspected anything. One passage in particular caught Harry off guard. Meghan wrote about a conversation with her mother regarding the careful framing of their public narrative. "Every interview, every appearance," the entry read, "must reinforce the story we want to tell. Harry must see it as organic, as genuine, but it is our narrative to control." The clarity of the language, the premeditated approach, left Harry stunned. The diary had not only revealed Meghan's plans, but also the orchestrated influence guiding them, an influence he had been blind to. The implications were profound. Harry had trusted Meghan, believed in their partnership, and assumed they were navigating challenges together. Now he saw that there had been a third party, quietly shaping outcomes, advising decisions, and ensuring that plans unfolded according to a predetermined design. The diary suggested that this influence had been present from the earliest days of the relationship, providing subtle guidance and strategic direction. Beyond personal interactions, the entries indicated that Doria's role extended to managing perceptions within the family and the public. She had advised on the timing of meetings with royal advisors, suggested strategies for responding to sensitive questions, and even guided Meghan on the delicate balance between personal expression and public image. Each entry demonstrated foresight, precision, and an acute understanding of both human behavior and media influence. Harry was struck by the combination of affection and strategy documented in the diary. On the one hand, Meghan's writing reflected genuine emotion, moments of vulnerability, and personal reflection. On the other hand, every step of their relationship, as influenced by her mother, appeared to be measured, considered, and designed to achieve specific outcomes. The interplay of love, ambition, and guidance created a tension that Harry struggled to reconcile. Friends who had observed interactions between Meghan and Doria later noted a quiet but clear dynamic. Doria's calm presence, her measured advice, and her ability to anticipate challenges suggested a level of influence that was often invisible to outsiders, but deeply felt by Harry. It was a subtle guidance that shaped behavior, reinforced objectives, and maintained alignment with a larger plan, one that now, through the diary, Harry was only beginning to fully understand. The diary also revealed advice from Doria that bordered on psychological influence. Suggestions about framing situations, guiding Harry's decisions without overt direction, and managing emotional responses were all documented. Meghan's entries reflected awareness of this guidance, noting how Doria's advice had helped navigate difficult moments, maintain appearances, and influence outcomes. Harry realized that he had been responding not only to Meghan's behavior, but also to the unseen hand of strategic guidance shaping that behavior. The more Harry read, the clearer it became that the mother-daughter dynamic had been a central component of Meghan's approach. It wasn't simply support, it was a partnership in planning, a collaboration designed to ensure that goals were achieved while appearances remained controlled. Every public appearance, every private discussion, and every decision documented in the diary had traces of this influence, creating a layered understanding of how deeply the strategy had been embedded in their lives. The revelation was emotionally devastating. Betrayal had never felt so complex. Harry was confronted not only with a spouse whose intentions had been partially hidden, but also with the realization that those intentions had been shaped and reinforced by a trusted parental figure. The combination of personal affection and strategic influence created a profound conflict, love entangled with manipulation, family guidance intertwined with ambition. And yet, amidst the shock, Harry also recognized the sophistication of this influence. Doria's guidance had been subtle, measured, and calculated. It wasn't overt control. It was careful steering, advising without apparent imposition, ensuring that outcomes aligned with strategic objectives while preserving the appearance of autonomy. The brilliance and subtlety of the influence were undeniable, even as the emotional impact weighed heavily on him. The diary also hinted at moments where Doria had prepared Meghan for potential obstacles, including Harry's reactions, public scrutiny, and challenges within the royal family. This wasn't casual motherly advice. It was preparation for a series of events that would unfold with precision, ensuring that Meghan's objectives remained on course. Harry realized that what he had thought were spontaneous decisions were, in fact, guided by foresight, strategy, and careful planning. The combination of personal betrayal, strategic influence, and public stakes created a situation of unparalleled complexity. Harry had to navigate not only his own emotions, but also the implications of a relationship that had been subtly influenced by a third party. Every decision he faced was now layered with consideration: how to respond to Meghan, how to manage family interactions, and how to anticipate public perception, all while processing the emotional weight of the diary's revelations. Friends, advisors, and family members began to notice the strain. Harry's demeanor, previously controlled and composed, now revealed the emotional toll of understanding the depth of the influence surrounding him. Conversations with his siblings and close confidants grew more frequent, more intense, and more strategic. Every discussion weighed consequences, assessed risks, and explored options for navigating both personal and public fallout. As the tension escalated, Harry also began to consider the impact on his children. The diary's revelations suggested that the plans and ambitions extended beyond immediate circumstances, potentially influencing long-term family dynamics, public perception. The responsibility of protecting them, while addressing the betrayal and strategic manipulation, added yet another layer of emotional weight and urgency to every decision. Ultimately, Harry came to understand that the influence of Meghan's mother was not a peripheral factor. It was central to the entire strategy. The diary revealed that decisions, behaviors, and public actions had been informed, guided, and reinforced by Doria's counsel, creating a web of influence that shaped outcomes at multiple levels. Harry realized that addressing the betrayal, protecting his family, and navigating the consequences required understanding this influence fully, a task that was as challenging as it was emotionally taxing. And just when Harry thought he had begun to process the depth of Doria's role, a new revelation emerged, one that would escalate the stakes even further, challenge his assumptions, and force him to confront the extent of the hidden agenda in ways he could never have anticipated. What drives someone to marry a prince? Love? Companionship? Or something far more calculated? Ambition, influence, and the lure of fame and financial freedom? For Prince Harry, the diary had already revealed that Meghan Markle's intentions went far beyond personal affection. By the time he reached this section of her writings, it became alarmingly clear. The marriage had always been intertwined with ambition, strategy, and a meticulously planned path toward independence from the royal family. The diary didn't shy away from discussing wealth. Meghan's entries detailed her desire for financial security, the careful management of assets, and the long-term planning necessary to protect personal interests after leaving the royal institution. She wrote about building networks of influence, leveraging media coverage, and creating opportunities that would ensure her financial and social standing. These weren't casual musings. They were deliberate plans, written with precision, foresight, and clarity. Harry read passages that described how to balance public image with private ambitions. Social media, interviews, and charity appearances were all analyzed and documented, with explicit strategies for using each opportunity to maximize profile, sympathy, and control over public perception. Harry realized that he hadn't just married a partner, He had entered a relationship where decisions were being mapped out with strategic intent from day one. The concept of fame was central to these plans. Meghan's diary described how to cultivate celebrity status, create viral moments, and engage public attention while appearing authentic and relatable. She meticulously planned interviews, public appearances, and even wardrobe choices to reinforce narratives that would strengthen her personal brand. Harry, who had grown up under constant media scrutiny, began to see how carefully orchestrated this approach had been, and how he had been unknowingly positioned as a supporting figure in a story designed for someone else's advantage. Financial considerations were equally calculated. Entries revealed plans for independent income streams, long-term investments, and arrangements that would provide autonomy while minimizing dependency on the monarchy. Harry had assumed that their discussions about money and lifestyle were shared decisions. Now he understood that some of them had been guided by strategic thinking documented well in advance. The diary made it clear that financial security wasn't just a practical concern. It was part of the roadmap for eventual independence from royal obligations. The most shocking entries were those that explicitly discussed leaving the royal family. Harry discovered that Meghan had contemplated, documented, and prepared for a strategic exit long before the public or even he could have imagined. The diary outlined the timing of such a move, the messaging required to maintain sympathy, and the ways to mitigate potential fallout. It wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't reactive. It was premeditated with contingencies mapped out in advance. Harry felt a mix of disbelief and anger. The person he had trusted, the partner he had envisioned sharing a life and family with, had not only prepared for a life independent of him and his family, but had meticulously documented how to accomplish it. Every step of the plan seemed designed to protect Meghan while placing Harry and the royal family in a reactive, secondary position. It was strategy disguised as love, ambition disguised as partnership. At the same time, the diary revealed the meticulous nature of planning for public perception. Meghan considered how to frame interviews, manage media leaks, and cultivate public empathy in ways that would benefit her ambitions. Each potential scenario was analyzed: questions she might face, criticisms she might encounter, and opportunities to assert her independence while maintaining an appearance of harmony. Harry began to see how every public appearance he thought was mutual had been shaped by these underlying strategies. Friends and advisors later confirmed that Meghan had approached early discussions about royal duties, charity involvement, and public engagements with a precise awareness of potential outcomes. What Harry had assumed were joint decisions were often influenced by guidance he didn't realize was in place. The diary confirmed that these influences weren't casual, they were calculated, intentional, and aligned with long-term goals to maximize independence and influence. The implications for Harry were staggering. Not only had the marriage been intertwined with hidden ambitions, but he had been positioned in a way that ensured he would be reactive, constantly responding to moves that had been anticipated and planned in advance. The diary revealed a dynamic in which Meghan's independence and career were paramount, while Harry's role was carefully framed to complement her trajectory rather than serve as an equal partner. This revelation forced Harry to confront harsh truths about their relationship. Every romantic gesture, every public appearance, every private conversation now carried an overlay of strategy. What he had thought were spontaneous acts of love were in many instances coordinated steps in a larger plan. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was structural, embedded in the very architecture of the relationship from the outset. The diary also revealed contingency plans. Meghan had considered scenarios in which the marriage faced challenges, public scrutiny intensified, or negotiations with family became difficult. Each scenario included strategies to maintain her objectives, how to navigate legal, financial, and public relations consequences while protecting her autonomy. Harry realized that he had not just married someone ambitious, he had married someone who had prepared for every conceivable outcome with meticulous foresight. And yet, amid these revelations, there were passages that revealed genuine emotion, reflections on family, and moments of vulnerability. Meghan expressed concerns about public perception, fear of failure, and even admiration for Harry himself. These entries complicated the narrative, reminding Harry that the diary was not purely a strategic document. It was a blend of ambition, reflection, and emotion. The tension between calculated planning and genuine feeling created a psychological complexity that Harry struggled to navigate. Family influence, financial strategy, and public image were all intertwined in a sophisticated web. Harry now understood that leaving the royal family was not simply a personal decision. It had been embedded in a broader strategy that combined ambition, preparation, and calculated public perception. Every decision, every move, every gesture had been considered within this context. The diary had provided clarity, but the clarity was painful. The fairy tale he had believed in was carefully constructed around ambitions that he had not been fully aware of. The consequences of these revelations were immediate. Harry's perception of his relationship, his trust, and his future had all been fundamentally altered. He recognized that continuing without addressing the strategic ambitions, the public messaging, and the hidden plans documented in the diary was impossible. The stakes were personal, emotional, and public, and the decisions he faced would determine the trajectory of his life, his family, and his public role. By the end of this chapter of Revelation, Harry understood one essential truth. The marriage he had entered was not only shaped by love, but also by ambition, strategy, and foresight. Every decision, every move, every carefully curated public moment was part of a roadmap designed to achieve objectives that had been quietly documented long before he had ever suspected. But just when Harry thought he had begun to process the scope of ambition and strategy, a new, even more explosive layer of secrecy emerged, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about trust.